Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. If you're a fan of FNAF, you've more than likely heard of FNAF the Musical by the extremely talented team at Random Encounters. They've relatively recently finished releasing the prequel series, First Nights at Freddy's, meaning that the entire story is over. So I thought, what better way to celebrate than making a full-length timeline of events of everything that happened in the musicals, starting from the prequel series and ending at the original Night 5, in complete chronological order. If you haven't already watched these musicals, then I recommend you take a look at the links in the description or the iCard in the top right to each video discussed today. And there will be spoilers for the new musicals in this video, so beware. One thing I want to clarify is that the Random Encounters FNAF lore is extremely different from that of the games, and I mean extremely. They even have Glitchtrap, William Afton, Purple Guy and Springtrap as completely different people. So, try not to let that anger you if you're a die-hard fan of FNAF and don't like fan interpretations of the story. And with that, let's begin. The first part of our timeline starts in an unknown year, presumably the early 1980s. For the sake of this video, we'll assume this takes place in 1983, but this isn't set in stone. William Afton is locking up for the night at Fredbear's family diner, when he discovers a child stashed away in the back room. Worrying for his safety, Afton takes him to the security office before he finishes locking up, only to be confronted by a man wearing Afton's Fredbear costume. The pair exchange a few heated words, before the man in the costume lunges at Afton and the child with a wrench, killing them both. From this point onwards, the man in the costume, otherwise known as Henry Emily, impersonates Afton and steals his identity. For the sake of simplicity, however, we will be referring to this character as Afton, Phone Guy, or Fake Afton throughout the rest of this video, so keep that in mind. Over the course of time, Afton would go on killing kids at Fredbear's, whilst also looking to expand the business slowly, by adding in more animatronic characters, such as Spring Bonnie, a companion for Fredbear. To his disappointment, the kids turned out to hate Spring Bonnie for being too scary. Moving on, we get to 1986 at Fredbear's family diner. A security guard by the name of Alexandra Eggs Benedict was doing some overtime at work, seeming eager to make some friendlier animatronics due to parent complaints. However, her employer, Mr. Afton, seems to dislike the idea and tells her to go home. As she's about to leave, she feels as if something is calling her, and opens up a file labelled Fredbear VR Experiment on the old Macintosh computer, only to discover it was already running. After being influenced by the program, otherwise known as Vanny, Alexandra begins working on new animatronics made from random everyday objects, trashing the gang. She steps back and admires her work, but Mr. Afton stumbles in, wearing his bear costume, and shouts at her for wasting his time before giving her a chilling threat to not ever dabble with animatronics again. Disheartened, Alexandra begins cleaning up the mess, but Vanny has other plans. With the new animatronics fully made, Alexandra has no more use, and Vanny ends up killing her. Or does she? A year later in 1987, Phone Guy hires the nephew of the real William Afton, Mike Afton. Mike has been ecstatic about working at Fredbear's, but unfortunately, the restaurant had shut down within 2 days of him being hired. However, Afton would then go on to call him about a new promotion to store manager in a completely new location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Much like Alexandra before him, Mike is eager to bring joy to kids and adults alike, and quickly begins on vastly improving the pizzeria, from adding games to new animatronics, with some of these quickly becoming part of the main gang, Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie Bunny, Chica Chicken, and Foxy the Pirate Fox in particular, although he brings in a tatty old rabbit costume called Springtrap. Things would, for the most part, run smoothly, until May 23rd, 1987. Mike had been working late and was starting to get tired when he heard a noise coming from the vent beside him, and was ultimately killed. The next day, the animatronics wander in to find Mike's dead body, and even though they assume it was Springtrap's doing, Mike's murderer has since been confirmed to be Pan Stan, who we see in the final shot of the video. Mr. Afton, however, upon seeing the dead body of his employee, simply picks up the phone and a folder of applications and calls a certain someone to whom he refers to as Mr. Wants to Battle. After the death of Mike, his sister, Elizabeth Lizzie Afton, would take up a job at Freddy's as a new computer technician, move into Mike's old apartment, and become obsessed with solving his case. While digging through some company files one night, she meets Bonnie for the first time and discovers the animatronics actually come to life at night. In another location, a man named AJ, or Purple Guy, will be working his shift, mainly involving cleaning up the location, apart from other security roles. Leaving the room, he would be completely oblivious to Circus Baby stepping out from behind the show curtains, lamenting about her hatred of being trapped in this place, knowing she's so close and so far from the freedom that's always just out of reach from her, before being interrupted by AJ for the second time. She stops mid-song, waiting patiently for AJ to turn back, but he doesn't. Possibly the worst mistake he could have made. Baby attacks AJ, violently choking him and finally about to leave the facility for the first time, but then the clock strikes 6 and Baby is shut down for another 18 hours before the next midnight. AJ, still extremely shaken up, makes a dash for the phone, calling up his employer, the one and only William Afton. Begging for a transfer, Afton suggests an opening at Freddy Fazbear's, to which AJ happily obliges, rushing out of the room, leaving Circus Baby alone, again trapped. A year after the events of Ground Zero, we get to the events of FNAF Web of Lies. At this point, Freddy Fazbear's has become a major talking point in the news, due to Afton's more than unconventional ways of keeping customers, not to mention the fact that Mike's death was still making headlines. The restaurant chain is now facing the possibility of being shut down due to an upcoming board inspection within 5 days' time. What Afton needs is to find a way to distract them, so he secretly begins plotting a hoax to frame Foxy, the Bite of 87, not knowing that he was being watched by none other than the puppet, protector of the animatronics and also a primary security system. Just as he grabs the cage to go and capture him, Lizzie walks in on him. Afton leaves her to go and wipe clean his old files, irrecoverably. Although she says she will, she clearly has other plans, specifically investigating the death of her brother, Michael Afton. While searching for any information she could find, she accidentally discovers a hidden file on the computer and opens it, not knowing what she had just done. Meanwhile, some of the animatronics go to try and free Foxy before Afton can frame him for the bite, although they're very quickly ambushed by none other than Trash and the gang. They still manage to get the keys and free Foxy, but it's all too late. Elizabeth struggles to control the computer, which is now going haywire, as it starts installing the file into a physical form known as glitchtrap. When questioned about what he is, he simply replies that he is a hidden file, or maybe something much more. With Trash and the gang working under him, Glitchtrap is able to run Elizabeth out of the pizzeria and capture the animatronics in a box, sending them to another location, Circus Baby's Party Works. Dark Remains picks up directly after FNAF Web of Lies. After escaping, Lizzie runs towards the car, unknowingly dropping her keys on the way. Balloon Boy takes them to her and convinces her to take him back with her back to her home, where they begin to formulate a plan to take down Glitchtrap, somehow involving Alexandra. Meanwhile, Freddy and the gang are set free from the cardboard box by Circus Baby, who informs them about the horrors she went through whilst being used as a test subject for animatronic experiments. She agrees to help them escape the facility, but is unable to join them due to a self-destruct chip placed inside her by the technicians. Afton, meanwhile, soon realizes that Foxy has been let free, and in a state of shock, he comes to the conclusion that the safety inspector must have broken in and freed Foxy to try and stop his plan. He begins to assemble his flamethrower chainsaw weapon, which he later uses to brutally murder the safety inspector in a fit of rage. Glitchtrap and the Trash and the gang have taken full control over the restaurant, holding Springtrap hostage and torturing him by holding him on a water-filled Mr. Can-Do. Springlocks tend to fail when they get wet, after all, in an attempt to convince him to join their side. The puppet makes a daring move of popping Mr. Can-Do's balloon head whilst Glitchtrap isn't around, before quickly hiding out of sight. Glitchtrap rushes back into the room, but finds nothing. During this time, Baby laments about the pain she's been caused, whilst Phone Guy embraces his darker side and builds a bomb. Back at Lizzie's house, Balloon Boy opens up an old video file of a psychiatric interview, with the patient being none other than Alexandra Benedict, who is insisting that she's not crazy and that she really was attacked by Vanny, but the psychiatrist doesn't believe her. Lizzie can tell that Balloon Boy means to recruit Vanny in the fight against Glitchtrap, and the two set out to return to Freddy's. Circus Baby, meanwhile, is helping the animatronics become supercharged, a process where they're filled with enough voltage to be able to override their daily sleep cycle. The animatronics hide in a box to get out of the main party area, and then, once the cover is blown, they decide to blend in with the technicians by pretending to be human. Once they get to the elevator, Chica realizes that they still need a plan to get back to Freddy's, to which Foxy replies that he wants to order a pizza. Afton uses his chainsaw to remove the hands from the body of Safety Inspector Corthan and bags them up. He then plugs in the bomb into the wall and sets it with a 5-hour timer. After this, he takes some time to admire his new weapon before using it to remove his own hands as well. Meanwhile, the animatronics are ordering a pizza from Freddy Fazbear's in an effort to hitch a ride back home. They settle for a raisin ketchup boneless pizza, despite Bonnie's protest for the addition of sprinkles. Within half an hour, their pizza is delivered by a man named Nate, so the animatronics sneak into his car so they can get back to Freddy's, but not before Foxy presses the alarm button, which gives Circus Baby the chance to flee the facility. During her escape, she kills countless technicians and threatens one into telling her how to get to Freddy's. Meanwhile, Phone Guy goes back to the office at Freddy's to erase the security footage. However, he is met by Glitchtrap, who is under the impression that he is actually William Afton. That is, until the mask is removed, which shocks Glitchtrap enough for Henry to make a quick escape. Glitchtrap tells Trash and the gang not to bother chasing him down, as he knows he won't end up going to the police. Later on at night, Lizzie and Balloon Boy make their move and return to Freddy's. After taping Pan Stan to a wall, they get to a computer and search the files for Vanny. When nothing seemed to show up, Lizzie noticed a pair of scissors gliding towards her. Vanny was there. After Vanny sees Glitchtrap on the camera, she explains to Lizzie that he was originally a therapy program that was banished behind a wall of encryption code because his methods were too extreme, and agreed to help defeat him. The plan was set. Vanny would distract Glitchtrap long enough for Lizzie to be able to lock him out of the main server, preventing him from being able to transfer his consciousness outside of the bunny suit. This seems to work for a short while, until Glitchtrap sees through Vanny's illusions, grabs her by the throat, and erases her file, effectively killing her. However, at the last second, Lizzie's program manages to work, leaving Glitchtrap unable to transfer his consciousness. The animatronics, inside Nate's car, sooner or later get caught by Nate and scare him. However, when he realizes who he was talking to, Nate eventually agrees to take them back to Freddy's. As they approach the front entrance, they jump into the door together to force it open. Now that they're in, they discuss what the next part of their plan would be, whilst Lizzie watches them on cameras. However, one by one, the cameras begin to go down, giving Lizzie the impression that something, or someone, was in there with them. Fortunately, it just turns out to be the puppet. After the animatronics sing a motivational song, they're greeted by Lizzie, who takes them back to the surveillance room to explain the plan. She had an extremely powerful earth magnet, which would be enough to disorient Glitchtrap for long enough to figure out a way to delete his file. The group then sees Springtrap on the cameras, attached to a wall and strung up by his wiring. Freddy and Balloon Boy go to his rescue, but when Glitchtrap catches them, the other three animatronics also join. In the meantime, Lizzie and the puppet go to the computer room to see if they can find anything of use. After Lizzie finds a drill, the pair get ambushed by Trash and the gang, and whilst the puppet is able to take care of Pan Stan, he ultimately gets sucked up into Mr. Hugs. Circus Baby, now out in the world, steals a car off a young driving student so that she can make her way to Freddy's. However, she would need to be quick. With all the animatronics now tied up and ready to be eliminated at any point in time, all Glitchtrap has to do now is just wait. The remaining members of Trash and the gang bring in Lizzie, who starts shouting that her uncle would put a stop to Glitchtrap, only for him to reveal the truth. The so-called William Afton, the man who had been impersonating her uncle all along, was actually the deranged serial killer Henry Emily. He then goes on to explain that he was actually a program designed for therapy by the real Afton, after he lost his family in a car crash, but was locked away after suggesting that Afton could kidnap a kid from Fredbear's family diner to act as a replacement for his own. After singing about how much he hates humans, Glitchtrap decides it's time to follow through with the rest of his plan and goes to decapitate Freddy. But before he can do so, Springtrap breaks free from his ties and falls to the ground, shifting Glitchtrap's attention to him instead. Grabbing Springtrap off the floor, Glitchtrap fries Springtrap's internal wiring and implements some sort of mind control, causing the animatronic to go unhinged. Freddy rushed to his rescue, but the damage was already done. Springtrap lunged at Freddy and brought him right back to the guillotine. But as Glitchtrap gives the order to do it, the puppet breaks free from the dust bag at the back of Mr. Hugs and takes Springtrap down the air vent. Multiple more attempts on Freddy's life are attempted, but none manage to succeed, including one from Glitchtrap, which is thwarted by Lizzie knocking him down and freeing Freddy. However, when Glitchtrap gets back up, he pushes Lizzie up against the wall and gets ready to end her life. But after a quick, rather inappropriate distraction from Bonnie, Lizzie attaches the magnet onto Glitchtrap's head, which disorients him for long enough for her to be able to stick the drill into his forehead in an attempt to destroy his circuit board. Unfortunately, Glitchtrap sees through this and saves himself, pushing Lizzie against the wall one more time, before being hit by a car that rams into the building, cutting off power and consequently the bomb with 1 second left. As the animatronics and Lizzie resurface from the rubble, they realise Glitchtrap is still alive, but heavily weakened. Lizzie picks up the drill one more time and destroys the circuit board. After Glitchtrap dies, Circus Baby leaves the car holding a seatbelt which she uses to try to kill Lizzie, but Lizzie grabs a pipe and fights back, ultimately ending Baby's life too. The remaining group then agree that the animatronics will stay with Lizzie as long as they follow rules, and the animatronics go outside to the car whilst Lizzie grabs her bag. Bonnie calls her from outside, to which she responds that she'll be there in a second, but Glitchtrap finds some small remaining life in him, enough to grab onto Lizzie's leg and electrocute her, delivering his final line by saying, "No, she won't." In doing so, Glitchtrap also temporarily restores power to the building, which is enough for the bomb to hit 0 on the countdown and explode, destroying any evidence of the events that went down there. The animatronics look from outside in sadness, as they realise what had happened. Freddy calls for Nate for comfort, saying that he has no one else to call, and Nate gets out of bed to go meet up. A news report shows that the police had ruled the explosion to be caused by a drunk driver, and the victims of the event were Lizzie and also the fake William Afton, who is shown to have made new robotic hands for himself. Henry's at a table in his office, interviewing 2 potential new security guards, Nate and AJ. After some convincing, he manages to get them both on the security team, before introducing himself to AJ as Scott Cawthon. 1995. Mark, the new night guard for Freddy Fazbear's, starts his shift whilst listening to the greeting from the phone guy. However, he dismisses the warning about the animatronic characters moving around at night and begins to watch the cameras. Freddy, Bonnie and Chica begin to activate and get excited about the possibility of meeting the new night guard. Mark sees the trio moving towards him and begins to panic, before closing the office door. After some panicking and a rather romantic encounter with Foxy, Mark runs out of power and the animatronics start coming closer and closer, singing lullabies as they do so. But just before they get to him, the clock hits 6 AM and Mark is saved, but only to learn from the morning shift guard, Purple Guy, that he has another 4 nights to go. After the events of his first night, Mark would return prepared, this time with a multitude of weapons, ranging from machetes to assault rifles and everything in between. This time, Mark would not be the one cowering in fear. Calling out to Foxy to come get a bite, he would mistake a caretaker for him and shoot him, causing the police to be called by presumably the neighbours of the area. Mark would be taken to the cop car, whilst blabbering about how the animatronics were the souls of kids stuffed into the suits. Police being police would go out to get some donuts, but they would forget to lock the vehicle, giving Mark the perfect chance to escape. Arriving home, he would dye his hair red to avoid any recognition from the cops and lay low. Now without a guard to work the night shift, Afton would have to call up none other than Nate. Due to their history, Afton was slightly hesitant when calling him, but figured out that he was his only option. Nate was also unwilling to take the job, but due to unpaid rent and a lack of money, this was his only option too. Picking up the phone, Nate would question if the uniform was still the same, and would head out to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. During the shift, he would discover that Springtrap had gotten loose and attacked the animatronics. Chica then warns Nate that Springtrap was making his way to the office, before Nate gives a comment that the door can be locked. Unfortunately for him though, Springtrap was already in the office and lunges at Nate. Freddy does his best to save Nate, but ultimately decides to just run away. Just when it seemed like all hope is lost, the puppet comes in to save the day, but Springtrap knocks him into the fan, killing him instantly. Foxy finally manages to break free from the air vent that he was hiding in, which lands on Springtrap and knocks him out. Now that the puppet was dead, the animatronics needed someone to help them defeat Springtrap, to which Bonnie says that he knows someone. The next night, Nate pulls up with the animatronics to Mark's front driveway, whilst the animatronics head inside the house to try and get him. Meanwhile, Nate is distracting Springtrap inside the pizzeria with a remotely controlled Balloon Boy, until Springtrap knocks off the antenna and kills Balloon Boy. After much scrambling around the house, Foxy manages to make his way inside Mark's bedroom through the closet, at which point all of the other animatronics are let in as well, and try to get Mark to help them fight off Springtrap. However, Mark, not believing the situation, grabs Freddy and threatens to kill him with a knife if the animatronics didn't stay back. Fortunately, Nate walks in and gets Mark to calm down. After some explaining, Mark agrees to come back to Freddy's. During the day leading up to the final night, the animatronics, Mark, and Nate all lay low at Nate's apartment. Whilst the animatronics are sleeping, Mark and Nate discuss a plan: survive until 6 AM. At the beginning of the 5th night, the gang all enter Freddy Fazbear's to find a way to defeat Springtrap, and are greeted with a decapitated Balloon Boy hanging from the ceiling. They soon realise that Springtrap can be beat if he got wet, because water would trigger a springlock failure. So, the animatronics all set out to find the fire extinguishers, whilst Mark sets up the trap. Unfortunately, it became evident that somebody had managed to get to all of the fire extinguishers except one, which Chica manages to get to the office whilst being chased down by Springtrap. As Mark suspends Springtrap in the air by some rope, Nate activates the extinguisher, but it goes everywhere. Suddenly, Nate is hit on the head and knocked out with another fire extinguisher by none other than AJ. AJ reveals that he was the one behind Springtrap, and it was only meant to be a harmless prank to spook Mark and Nate enough to quit, so that he could get more hours. The group talk it out, and agree that AJ can have the hours, as long as the animatronics have someone to play with overnight. As it seems that everything is finally over, the phone starts ringing again. Phone Guy congratulates them for being able to survive 5 nights at Freddy's, but expresses his disappointment that they hadn't all turned on each other by then. As Phone Guy continues speaking, the office wall begins to break down and a loud chainsaw is heard. A man in a bear costume is shown to be breaking it down, and when he takes off the mask, it's revealed to be fake Afton. He stabs AJ, killing him instantly. When Freddy tries to stand up to him, Afton kicks him away, also seriously injuring him. Eventually, Mark sets Springtrap onto Phone Guy, distracting him for long enough for everyone to make an escape. However, Phone Guy, in an attempt to fight off Springtrap, uses the flamethrower attached to his chainsaw and ends up setting the pizzeria on fire, and everything and everyone inside burns to the ground. The next day, Nate and Mark are on a phone call discussing what had happened, when Mark suggests that Nate could apply at the new Freddy's sister location, Faz Games Limited, where the animatronics work on video games rather than being at a pizzeria. They hang up when Nate gets another call, and when Nate picks it up, it is revealed that Phone Guy survived the fire and was found by the police, along with some interesting security footage. Afton begins going on about how he will find him one day, and that there's no place that Nate could hide, but Nate doesn't take it seriously. He gets up, chucks his phone in a water fountain, and walks onwards, ending the FNAF the Musical saga. And that, my friends, is the full timeline of FNAF the Musical. Of course, there are a few minor details that we left out of the main section of this video, namely the fact that sometime between the ending of the prequels and beginning of the original series, Freddy bites the head off from a kid, which is what causes Nate to initially quit the job in the first place. But overall, we have the main timeline here. Like I said at the beginning, if you haven't already seen these musicals, please go ahead and show Random Encounters some support by watching them from the links in the description or using the iCard on the top right now. And if you have already seen them and are hungry for more FNAF musicals, fear not, because I am about to plug myself. You see, over the past few months, I have been writing my own movie sequel to FNAF the Musical, called Final Night at Freddy's. Yes, I know it's not the most creative name, but what can you do? Anyway, long story short, there are voice actors for all of the characters, and pretty soon I will be releasing separate episodes of these musicals, and then compile them all into one big supercut with extra scenes, just like our redo. So, if you want to see that, then be sure to subscribe with post notifications on so you don't miss them. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.